Hey everyone, this video is for my Algebra 2 students. This is part 2 of a Lesson 64 lesson. We are on page 263, 64b. I'm going to skip the whole top half of the lesson, of the page, and just go right to example 64.3. I've got 4 examples to get through in this video, so listen fast. They start off with -2 times square root of -2 times square root of -3. And we remember that this deals with what we learned last week or the week before about Euler's notation, where the square root of -1 is equal to this imaginary letter I. You can't take the square root of a negative number. I squared is -1, I cubed is -I, and I to the 4th is 1, and then I to the 5th. It keeps repeating itself as we go around through. So we've actually done this one before, but by way of review. You can think of this as the square root of 2, and then there's an I out there, because that's the square root of 2 times the square root of -1, and the square root of -1 is I. The square root of -3 is the square root of 3 times the square root of -1, or the square root of 3 times I. Square root of 2i times the square root of 3i gives me square root of 6, and outside the radical is that I squared. I squared is -1. This is square root of 6 times the square root of -1, so we get negative square root of 6. We could have seen that up here at the top. We know that anytime you have any number, the square root of any number times itself, it's just going to be whatever number's under the radical. If I have the square root of 73 times the square root of 73, I do not need to know what 73 times 73 equals and then take the square root of it. I just know that that's going to be 73. Up here, I've got this square root of -1 and another square root of -1. The fact that I have 2 of them together means that they're going to equal -1. And then it comes out right there. I do not write it as -1 square root of -6, but I could if I wanted to. There's your 1. Okay? Like that. So remembering this, we're going to go up and do the second example, which is 64.4. It says, simplify this. We have 4i cubed. Well, I cubed is -I, and I'm going to go ahead and write it as 4 times -I. In the next line, I'll write it as -4i. If you just want to do that right off the bat, that's fine. Minus 2. I to the 4th is 1, so I'm multiplying by 1. Plus 2. The square root of -9. That's the square root of 9 times the square root of -1. So that will be plus 2. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of -1 is I. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. Whenever you see this, that negative inside the radical, you automatically know that there's going to be a letter I as part of your answer. The square root of 9 is 3. So I know right now that's 2 times 3i. If you need to go in and do this separately, here's the square root of 9 times -1. Square root of 9 is 3. 9. Hey, that's fine. Over here, I don't need to take this letter I out of that -3 or that -3 like I did here. The square root of 73 times the square root of 73 is 73. The square root of -1 times the square root of -1 is -1. The square root of -3 times the square root of -3 is -3. Now, if you wanted to do that as square root of 3i times the square root of 3i, square root of 9i squared in the next line, you can do all that if you want, but learn little shortcuts. All right, so I have -4i minus 2 plus 6i minus 3. We combine like terms. 6i minus 4i gives me 2i. -2 minus 3 gives me -5. they have the answer written as -5 plus 2i. It does not matter which term you put first. All right, let's move on to the next one. Need to pay close attention because we're going to be doing distributive property, and you have to be very careful. I might even use colors, different colors. We'll see. 4 plus 2i times 3 minus 2i. The 4 gets multiplied by the 3. I'll tell you what I will do. I'll write down what's happening. 4 plus 3, 4 times -2i. And I'll use parentheses, -2i over here too. Now, I'll do this one in red. 2i times 3. 2i times -2i. Four times 3 is 12. 4 times -2i, -8i. 2i times 3 plus 6i, and -2i times +2i gives me -4i squared. That -4i squared is -4 times -1. So that's technically +4. The -4i squared becomes +4. So I have 12 plus 4, 16. -8i plus 6i minus 2i. We have combined everything using distributive property. One more problem using the distributive property. (5i minus 2). I'm not going to use colors this time. 5i minus 2 and 4 plus 3i. Make sure I wrote it right. 5i times 4 plus 5i times 3i plus -2 times 4, -2 times 3i. There we are. First, outer, and last. We have 20i plus 15i squared minus 8 minus 6i. This I squared is -1. So this is -15. I have 20i minus 6i. That's 14i. I have -15 minus 8. That is -23. Not too bad. There you go. We're right at 9 minutes. So let me know if you have trouble. Again, there's your assignment, numbers 1 through 15. See ya.